A very oily skin.
I did put some anti-shine on
Now
your...
you want to go put the phones on hold?
You're gonna stay here, make sure you don't walk on the
Right.
on the plastic.
I
They're gonna hear
understand.
it, yeah.
I'm going to move over there.
My name's Stephen J. Abramson. Today I'm happy to be interviewing multi-Emmy winning director Louis J. Horvitz. And today is November 13th, 2008. We are at home with Lou in Los Angeles, California.
Thank you. I tell you, I have about 20 more minutes and then I got to go.
That's what I heard. So we're going to start right at the beginning. I mean, the beginning. What was your name at birth?
My name at birth was Louis John, John, Horvitz, Horvitz. And I was born in downtown Los Angeles at, I believe, St. Joseph's Hospital. And I lived for the first 5 years of my life in Lincoln Heights with my mom and dad and family after World War II, and my grandfather, Ricardo Bisola.
When were you born?
I was born December 1st, 1946.
Okay. And did you have any nicknames as a kid?
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Nicknames as a kid. My dad was Lou Horvitz, as well as me being Lou Horvitz. So he was Big Louie and I was Little Louie. So the entirety of my life, and even to this day, one of my aunts or uncles will say, "Where's Little Louie?" Well, I'm not so little anymore, and I'm also not, well, I'm Louie, L-O-U-I-S. Louie is my nickname. But so it was, Little Louie was a nickname, and then Louie J. A lot of people call me in school Louie J. or Lou J.
What is your father's name?
My father's name is Lou, L-O-U, Horvitz, Horvitz. He didn't have a middle name.
Okay, so same spelling.
Same spelling. But the issue that happened with my dad and I, which caused me to use my full name, Louis or Louis, was that as I got older and living with my mom and dad before going to university, the phone would ring and they'd go, "Is Lou there?" And they would go, "Yeah, Lou, it's for you." "Oh, no, the other Lou, Big Lou, Little Lou." So, and his work cohorts and people would call the house. So as soon as I could get my full name into play, I did. That way we got the confusion out of the way.
And what did your father do?
My father's still alive. He's 87 years old, God bless him, and my mom, who's 83. They'll kill me when they see this, and I've actually told their age. Although my mother's hair is still pure black at 83. She looks great. My father was an aeronautics engineer. He started as an aircraft mechanic, and then after World War II, he went into North American aviation, then North American Rockwell, and then Rocketdyne, and ultimately ended up on the Atlas rocket engines and eventually the space shuttle, and then retired from aerospace.
How about your mom? What was her full name and what did she do?
My mom's full name, my mom was a housewife and a teacher, and her full name is Clarissa Bonet Sola, and she is Latin. Her mother is Clotilda Maria Sola from Mérida, Yucatan. And her father, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, is Ricardo B. Sola from Havana, Cuba. And my father is Russian from Gomel, Russia. And then he and his brothers immigrated, or whatever you would say, to Canada. And the family, they were furriers.
What traits did you inherit from your parents?
What traits did I inherit from my parents? I think from my dad, tremendous discipline and a tremendous work ethic. He really worked hard. I have 4 sisters and a brother, so there were 6 of us at any given time, 3 usually in the house, and then as the time went on, 6 altogether. So he was up at 6 a.m. in the morning. He went to work. He worked 5 days a week. He worked overtime to make enough money to pay for all of us, put us all through college. And so that work ethic came from my father. And also from my dad, I really inherited something that I really value today, which was a sense of being true to your word and loyalty. And he was my dad is a very talented mechanic. when he's not building rocket ships. So there was no car that he couldn't fix. And if somebody said, "Hey, Lou, will you fix my car for me? I'll be there Saturday, 9 a.m." I'm happy to fix it. How much? Nothing. Just bring it over. If they didn't show up, that was the last time we ever saw that person. Because he really said, if you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. So from that, I inherited kind of a very strong George Patton-esque attitude. My mother was fantastic because she was a Rhodes Scholar. She was very, very intelligent and demanded that we all seek higher education at university, and she always helped me with my schoolwork and would always drill me and ask me all the test questions and was constantly preparing her kids. I just talked to her last night, and she goes, "Oh, I'm glad you called. I wanted to just tell you that, if I should go, I wanted to write a letter saying that my proudest achievement were my 6 kids." And I'm going, "You're not going anywhere." She goes, "Well, just in case I do, in case I don't get to write it." So I had 2 really good parents in my mom and dad, and 2 very different sets of individuals and sets of kind of work ethic from my dad, and in high intelligence and the necessity to study from my mother.
What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a kid?
So I'm writing a fiction book right now, and what I wanted to be when I was a kid was a thief. Is what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a small-time. No, I for a while I dabbled in the idea of getting money quick. No, I actually was born and raised, as I say, in Lincoln Heights, but by 1951, we moved to the San Fernando Valley to Van Nuys, California. And by the time I was 10, 12 years old, the one thing I wanted to do was get a car. And of course, my dad was working on them, and I wanted to race cars, and we did. We raced them on the streets of the San Fernando Valley. And if it was one thing I really wanted to be, it was an open wheel car racer. And we tried. I tried on the streets and Irwindale Raceway and all the places that you could race, but I wasn't fast enough, so I then decided I wanted to pursue music, which I did. When I was 3 years old, my mom and dad were conned into buying an accordion for me because Lawrence Welk was very popular on television at the time, and they gave me an accordion, and I played that all my life. And then by the time I realized it was an accordion, I wanted to get a guitar, which I did, and a piano, and moved on from there. So from car racing to being a musician, we raced the Beach Boys in Torrance, and they were cutting records, and as you know, and Steve, and they were making it, so I figured I could be a rock and roll star too, and I wanted to be a musician. And ultimately, again, like, I wasn't fast enough to race, and I wasn't really great enough. I didn't want to practice. I had a lot of bands. I played at the Whiskey A Go-Go. I did a lot of music. But then I decided that I would be best served to ultimately photograph the great musicians.
And photography, was that a big passion of yours at that time?
Yeah, photography came later. In the San Fernando Valley, you race cars, you play guitars, you go to school, and then you get to the beach as soon as you can, and get on a surfboard and just play in the Southern California sun, which is what I spent most of my time doing, in addition to going to school. But the pictorial art did not come until I was at university, and that was at UCLA. And by the time I went to university, my first sister, I'm the second of the 6, Janet, she was also a Rhodes Scholar. She'd gone to UCLA, so I followed in her footsteps. And by the time I kind of got out of Grant High School in the San Fernando Valley and got at UCLA, I just pretty much knew that I was going to go to college because my parents wanted me to, but I was still pursuing music. Strangely enough, I should have probably gone to Schoenberg Hall and studied music theory and et cetera, but that wasn't what you did when you were a rock and roller. And so I picked law, And simply because I thought, I could make money. You were going to be a doctor, a lawyer, in those days. And this is the 60s now. And so all my friends went away to all the party schools. I went to UCLA, and in the very first year, they let you take one of your major courses while you're doing general education. And I went into the first law class and was given stacks of books and said, read all these this semester. And I was laying in front of the law library at UCLA, and I started reading, and I'm going, there's no way I'm going to be a lawyer. And now I was very lonely, and all of a sudden, this is 1964, 65, I saw this guy who was very cool, and he had two girls on his arms, and they were laughing and looking like they were having a good time. They had their sunglasses on, and I said, I wonder what department they're in. And I followed them over to McGowan Hall at UCLA, and the backstages were open, and there were cameras, and there were lights, and there were people doing scenes, and there was music, and there were all the fine arts, the theater arts, and I said I found a home. And from there, I began studying pictorial art in the art department and theater arts.
What was your undergrad degree in?
Well, at the time that at UCLA we called it fine arts, which was theater, television, and film. In the years since then, when Gil Cates, who's one of my closest and dearest mentors and friends, he took over as the dean of UCLA. They called it something else now, but it was Bachelor of Arts in Fine Arts, and you basically had to get your degrees in film, television, and theater arts.
What were the earliest TV shows that you remember watching?
The earliest TV shows I was just writing about the other night, Howdy Doody, Cuckoo the Clown, Captain Zoom, Dragnet, 77 Sunset Strip, Ozzie and Harriet. In professional life later, I was to actually meet Ozzie and Harriet and David and Ricky when he resurged the series Ozzie's Girls, and he did it at Stage 5. And here it was, I was watching that, Leave It to Beaver, and so I was doing Ozzie and Harriet, and then all of a sudden Ozzie Nelson, I get a call to do camera. I was a cameraman. I started as a cameraman and a cinematographer out of university. Ozzie Nelson is resurging Ozzie and Harriet. It's going to be Ozzie's Girls, and he takes in two girls, and while Ricky and David are at school. So I actually go to Stage 5 on Cahuenga, across the street from Midtronics. I walk onto the stage, and Ozzie's recreated the entire Ozzie and Harriet set. The living room, the kitchen, everything was identical. And I walked in, and he walked up, and he goes, "Hi, I'm Ozzie Nelson." And I'm going, "Oh my God, you're Ozzie of Ozzie and Harriet." And then Harriet Hilliard came out. She goes, "Hi, I'm Harriet." And I thought, I'm in Ozzie and Harriet. And David was there too, who was directing for Ozzie. Ricky was in a band and had his own band, and I knew Ricky from the music, so I'd met him before Ozzie and Harriet. And so Ozzie goes, "Would you like some ice cream?" And I thought I was like in the Twilight Zone. I'm going, this is just like the show, until we started shooting. But those were the earliest television shows.
You so you said that you were a cameraman. Well, you were a studio cameraman out of college, basically. Where did the transition come from being a camera operator to your first directing gig?
At UCLA, after I found that I wasn't going to be a lawyer, I realized that I was just going to have my bands. I didn't know what was really going to happen with that. I went into the art department, which was right next to theater arts, film, and television, and I met a man named Edmund Teskey. And Edmund Teskey was a contemporary of Man Ray and of Ansel Adams. And I met this man in this course that I took, an art department still photography course. And he was so enthralling in the way he presented the art of photography. He shot 8.5 by 11. He shot with old black and white plates. We processed our own negatives. and he would have come guest lecture with us, Ansel Adams and Man Ray, and he was an experimental artist. He was really quite an amazing man, Edmund Teskey. He passed. I just became enamored with the art of still photography, and so I now immersed myself in the art department, and the music and the moving photography had not even come yet because it was early on. I was in theater arts, acting. I had to do acting scene studies. I didn't like it because I'd have to memorize lines, so I could never really be a good actor. I just didn't want to bother memorizing things. But I lived in the dark room with these teachers, and then when I discovered that James Wong Howe was the moving picture teacher at UCLA. They had a lot of guest lecturers and professors at UCLA. Then I went into moving photography with James Wong Howe, still photography with Ansel Adams, Edmund Teskey, and Man Ray. And then I really fell in love with the idea of becoming a pictorial artist and emphasizing more the pictorial art. And so I learned how to use still cameras, Nikons, you name it, whatever kind of still camera we had at the time, Pentax, Panaflex came later in film, and then I also learned all of the moving cameras, BNCRs, Aeroflexes, IMOs. UCLA had a film department that had almost every kind of camera you could get your hands on, and every kind of camera I get my hands on, I did. And I actually began winning awards and scholarships for my still photography, but I did want to do the moving photography, and so I made that transition. By the time I actually graduated, I was in the film department, and I was now shooting all of the AAU track and field. It's the Big Ten now and Pac-10. But I would just go get a camera. I would go shoot the track meets. I would shoot the football games. I'd go get it processed. I'd wrap it up. I'd take it over to the local news and earn some income that way. But ultimately, when I left university, I was really a pictorial artist, and I went to work at NBC on summer relief as a television cameraman in the days. This is 1969 now. In the days of Dean Martin's Gold Diggers, the Jerry Lewis Show, when the networks won their heyday at NBC. Simultaneously, I continued shooting film for the university. I also had Francis Ford Coppola, Carol Ballard, Steve Burham, who were 10 years older than I was, who had come back from the Vietnam War. I was in school just on the cusp of the war, and did not have to go over there. And so when they came out, I knew them. They were 10 years older. Francis was doing You're a Big Boy Now. George Lucas was doing THX 1138. I started crewing for them, and then I started operating for them. And when they moved on in their careers as directors and DPs, they took me with them. And so I ended up at the Universal Camera Department, loading, firsting, and then ultimately operating.
How did still photography inform your later career as a television director? I mean, in terms of visual style and anything?
Well, Steve, you know how it affected us. It took us 6.5 days to make this one shot with the Yoval on camera right there. Yeah, I saw everything, and I still do, through a lens. And strangely enough, I wear glasses. And I'm not wearing them now because they're really heavily magnified, and sometimes they reflect. Most people know me from directing with glasses. But for becoming a pictorial artist, the last thing is what I should have became. But I wonder if it wasn't how I had seen with my glasses things differently. And I had to wear these since I was a little boy. When I was 3-4 years old, I started wearing corrected lenses. And so what it did in terms of still photography, it reflected just basically in composition. And I consider, my art as a compositional pictorial artist. So the effect was that, if I'm sitting at a dinner table, I'll move the salt, I'll move the sugar, I'll move the glasses. They'll have to be in the perfect composition for as I see it. So it's a little bit of a curse, but it's a lot of fun.
But so I guess obviously lighting would be a big part of that too, then, right?
Yes, lighting. Lighting's another issue. It's dark now, so our color temperatures are good, I'm sure. Yes, I mean, lighting is really what pictorial art is about. It's painting with light. And it's probably even in literally painting with light, even the master oil artists, of the Renaissance era, or Caravaggio or Monet or Chagall or anybody that painted in Florence. If you look at the paintings and you go to those cities, the light determined what those pictures ended up being. So lighting is like probably the highest degree of import to me. When I go to make a picture, I really need to know that I've got the DP, the director of photography, that really sees it the way I see it, or is so spectacular that I just love what they did. And knowing that if I have a good DP and an incredible production designer for a set, I'll compose it. And I pride myself on making sure that you at home, when you watch my live television directing, get the best angle, get the best shot you can. And I also try to really, romance the set and romance the hard work that the director of photography put into the shot.
Now, from what you told me, it sounded like you were starting out a nice little career as a film camera operator and starting out in the movie business. What happened from going from starting that way to getting to be the director of Fernwood Tonight? When did you start directing television?
That's too funny. Hang on. Are we good? Are we still looking good?
Yeah. Oh, well, I think so.
You guys all right there? How did I move from film to television, really, is the question.
Right.
I moved, I was at UCLA, as we talked about, and I was heavily into the pictorial art, and I was debating still whether I was going to be, going to continue pursuing my music. I never gave up my bands. I cut records. I had a record contract with a man named Al Cash of April Blackwood. I was writing demos for Neil Diamond, coming close. And when I got out of university, I immediately graduated on a Friday, and I got a job at NBC, which was video camera versus film camera. And so my immediate responsibility was to get a union card, which was NABIT. And it cost $153 just for entry, and I didn't have that kind of money. I was still paying off my student loans, but I did have a Fender Rhodes, 2 Marshall stacks, a Fender bass, 2 Fender Stratocasters, and drum kit belonging to the rest of my band members. So I piled them all on my dad's station wagon, took them down to a pawn shop in Van Nuys, on Van Nuys Boulevard, pawned them, got the money, bought the ticket, my NABIT card, and went into being a television cameraman. Now, mind you, I'd done television camera at UCLA in black and white with a turret lens. This was color camera. Let's make a deal with Monty Hall. And my band members calling me, asking me where we're going to play this weekend. I'm going, well, we've got a little bit of a hitch. We're not going to play for a couple of months. I had to tell them I'd hawked all their gear. So they were coming after me. So next thing I knew, I was in television. Then when that tour of duty ended, they hired you 3 months at a time. You were a cinematographer and a director too. I went back to continuing to shoot film with the guys that I talked about, and so it was like back and forth. What was it going to be, television or film? The ultimate situation that made me go into television was I'd reached a point where the first 3 to 4 or 5 years of my career, I was doing both television and film. I was still doing my music, but what I had studied ultimately to do, this is kind of convoluted, was to direct multi-camera. That's what I did at UCLA. They had the television division, and though I was in film, I didn't have the seniority to get on a moviola to cut what I shot. I couldn't get a camera, and I couldn't record my music because there was seniors and juniors ahead of me. But when I found the television department, Abe Wallach and Frank Lauderette at the UCLA television department, there was only like 20 of them, and here were 3 moviolas, and here was a whole recording studio, and here were all these film cameras. So I just jumped over to the television department, but still continued to use all of the tools that I wanted to basically, one, record my music, shoot me recording my music, edit me recording my music, and going around town hawking trying to sell my music. So I was very versed, if you will, in all of the forms. So that's got me to television. Then as time passed, I worked for every major director that are now my contemporaries and friends, and probably you've interviewed them, Dwight Hemian, Don Mischer, Marty Pacetta, Art Fisher, he passed away, Stan Harris, Stanley Dorfman, John Moffat, Walter Miller, you name it. I was their cameraman. And what was happening was that I was really seeing that I was loving the pictorial art. I was doing more television than I was film, but I was still desiring possibly to give it a shot at directing because I'd studied to direct. And about the time I excelled in the cinematography, I had to make a decision. I was either going to give up the idea of being a director, a television director, or I was going to give up the idea of being a musician, or I was going to ultimately just say, I'm going to be a director of photography, which was another move altogether, which would have meant I would have had to get films. I would have had to go to a studio, to Warner Brothers or Universal, and go through the system. And I didn't have anybody in the business. And that position in film of a director of photography is an inherited position. So about the time I said, the heck with it, I'm not going to direct, I'm going to still play, but I'll do it just for fun. I'm going to just really devote, my life to being a director of photography. And I was about to apply to Universal for a full-time gig. Steve Buren was there, Caleb Dachanel was there, Carol Ballard was still shooting there. And then about the time I was going to do that, I got a call from a vice president at ABC Television in late night. His name was Wally Weltman. And as I was a cameraman on the Grammys for Marty Pacetta, I was shooting for Dwight Hemian. And as I sat on camera doing the close-up camera, these vice presidents would sit in the back of the house, not unlike what we do now, as I direct and we're rehearsing, and we'd just shoot the breeze, and they'd ask me what was going on. And this vice president, Wally Weltman, said, hey, we're starting to do rock and roll on television, and I hear you got a rock and roll band, and music, and nobody knows how to shoot rock and roll on television. We're doing this series called In Concert. Are you interested in directing it? And I said, yeah, why not? I don't have a DGA card. I couldn't get a DGA card, which was part of the reason it was frustrating. I had every union card for shooting. I had NABIT, I had IBEW for CBS, International Brotherhood of Electronic Workers. I can actually rewire that electrical outlet for that. I had an IATSC 659 cinematographer's card, but I couldn't get a Director's Guild card. So Wally said, don't worry about it. We'll give you 5 episodes of In Concert for Dick Clark and Jorn Winther. And I said, oh, this is wild. I said, okay. The next thing I knew, I was at the Aquarius Theater on Sunset Boulevard. I was in a video truck in the parking lot, and I had 5 cameras. I hadn't done any multi-camera directing since 1 or 2 projects at UCLA, and that was my first directing assignment. I did the Hughes Corporation, Rock the Boat Baby, and the OJ's Money, Backstabbers, and I did 8 music acts that night, and for the next couple of days I did 5-hour shows for In Concert.
And those were live performances, weren't they?
Those were live performances. Everything was live. And I just started going, take 3, take 2, take 1. But the reality of it was, I had no idea what I was doing. But I thought I could get away with it because I played. So it was kind of a natural thing. You're going to sing, and then there's going to be an 8-bar break, and it's going to be a guitar player, and then maybe it's going to be Dickie Betts from the Allman Brothers. Maybe there's going to be a Hammond B3 break. Then it's going to go back to a chorus, and eventually these guys will end. And so I just covered it, and I kind of really came up at that point with a zone defense, which was a cover camera, 2 side angles, and a close-up on the lead singer, which was to become what I called the zone, and a lot of people copied it. It was just early television and early music on television.
So are you talking 4 cameras, no jib, no
5 cameras.
Okay, handheld and a jib, or no at that time?
No, we're talking about 2 center cameras, and we're talking about 2 side pedestal cameras, because handhelds weighed a lot. I know I carried them around. They were like PCP 70s. They were 65 pounds, and they were still attached to a cable with a guy that carried a backpack, and 1 handheld who could get around and get the drum shot, get the crowd, get the reverse. So I was working with 5 cameras. Jibs were virtually for television only in the studio with Nikes and maybe a Zeus now and again, but mostly Nikes, and everything were pedestals, because at that time everything weighed so much. The cameras were huge; they weighed a lot, and not just the handhelds, but the TK-41s took a small crane, like you were lifting a motor out of a race car to get it out, or it would take 4 guys to get it onto a pedestal. So you had to put them on pedestals. And no, my jibs and my Steadicams came much later. However, when I was shooting film at, doing Mannix or doing Gunsmoke or something over at one of the studios, we certainly had, Titans and Zeus's and, big cranes, movie style, and dollies and tracks. So the idea of moving cameras or dollying cameras that weren't just fixed, as television was already part of my consciousness, and I couldn't really understand why we weren't like having all of that in television until I found out the economics of television.
So how did you? Let's talk about Fernwood Tonight. How did you get that gig?
Oh God, Fernwood Tonight. I'm not sure that anybody remembers it. It is a cult classic, however.
Well, it's kind of a spin-off of Mary Hartman.
Yeah, it was Norman Lear, and it was there was a period where Mary Hartman and Soap with Billy Crystal, and Louise Lasser was Mary Hartman. It was a very off-the-wall 5-day-a-week soap drama, and it was all parody. It was all comedy. It was a takeoff on these daytime serials. And Martin Mull was Barth Gimble, Mary Hartman's husband, and she got tired of him, so she stabbed him to death with a Christmas tree ornament. And so he was off the series. And Norman decided Martin was so good he wanted to give him another series. So Barth became Garth, his twin brother, and he was now going to do a parody of the local talk show, and he called it, because our studio was on Fernwood Avenue in Hollywood, Norman called it Fernwood Tonight, and it was hosted by Martin Mull. When people saw Martin Mull, they go, well, you can't be this guy hosting this Fernwood Tonight talk show because you were Mary Hartman's husband. Oh, no, I'm his twin, Garth. And so Martin Mull got Fred Willard, who's still around. He works with my brother. They're in an acting company together. And it was Martin Mull and Fred Willard, and we parodied a very bad 5-day-a-week strip talk show like a Mike Douglas. And it had the Iron Lung Pianist, and it had Happy Kind and his Mirth Makers, a terrible band. The audience were all of the winos and people from the insane asylum that we put in the front row. Norman was really going toward a Mary Hartman soap, only in the talk show genre. How I got to direct that, being a rock and roll director, was there was a director called Alan Rafkin. He was a really good guy. He's still around. He's a terrific director. and he was Norman's director. And they were doing another series called Year at the Top with Greg Evigan and Paul Schaefer, who ended up on David Letterman. And so it was these two guys that had made a deal with the devil. This is simultaneously to Mary Hartman and Fernwood. And Alan said, and there was a concert sequence, and Alan Rafkin said, I don't know how to do a concert sequence, even though it's a situation comedy. So Alan said, you got to get me, get me a concert director. So I knew Paul Schaefer, because after In Concert, I went to work for Don Kirshner's rock concert. And I met Paul, who was one of Don's proteges. And Paul said, hey, get this guy Louis Horvitz. He's great. He'll do it for you. So I did the concert sequence at Year at the Top, and Norman saw that and thought, you are just the cat's pajamas. This is unbelievable. You're the sixes and nines. I got to give you your own sitcom. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, that sounds good. I'd never done a sitcom in my life. I didn't even know what a marked script was. I didn't even know they had a script supervisor. One thing I knew from film was a script supervisor who took notes. So the next thing I know, he goes, I'm starting a new show, Fernwood Tonight, and I want you to direct it. And I'm going, okay. So the first 5 episodes, Alan Thicke was the producer of it. Robin Thicke is his son, the singer now. And the 4 of us sat around and came up with the show with Norman and little Al Burton. And I was way, way over my head because Norman was used to Jim Drake and Alan Rafkin and some pretty serious situation comedy directors. That's all that they did. If they couldn't do a concert, I assure you, I couldn't do a situation comedy. Not that I didn't understand it, but I probably just wiped out my makeup there. At any rate, Lisa, are we okay there? At any rate, I found myself doing the first 5 episodes of this hybrid, which was scripted but improvisational. And so I know kind of why they got me, because when I was doing music, when the bands played, it was live, so that it could be 8-bar break, or it could be a 16-bar break, or they could trade vocals. So it was spontaneous. Even as we talk now, I realize that this was the start of having the tools that I needed to direct live television, because live television unfolds before you. And here I was doing music, which was unfolding before me. And then the first situation comedy I got, partially they'd be on the script and partially they'd be doing improvisation. It was a terrific series. And after about the 3rd one, and Norman and Al Burton over my back screaming, that's not a funny shot, take 2. That's not a funny shot, take 1. That's not a funny shot. Are you even on the right page? You don't even have the right script pages. And I'm going, there's a script for this show? So I saw my career pass before my eyes. I was thinking, gee, it'd be good to go back into film right about now. And then I called my agent at the time, Danny Stevens. He's since passed away, God bless him. And I said, you have fucking got to get me off of this show. He goes, why, Norman? You could start your whole career in situation comedy. You could get out of music. I'm going, I don't do situation comedy, and I don't have these guys yelling at me all day long. And so, we did 5, and then Norman calmed down, and he goes, well, we realized, he could do more, and I said no. And it wasn't until maybe a few years later that I actually did go back and do some stuff for Norman and Gary Shandling in later years. But I always pretty much knew from that experience that the idea of doing situation comedy was not for me. It was a writer, producer, actor's medium, and as a director, you were more of a technical director. So I stayed away from it.
But you said yourself it was kind of a hybrid. Like Fernwood Tonight had, ad-lib elements, I guess, and scripted elements. And this is way before, like, the Larry Sanders Show. So the fact that, how many cameras did you use on this? I mean, typically the same number on a talk show?
We used
a late night talk show?
A late night talk show back in, this is in the 70s.
Right.
Combined age of everybody in this room, I'm still older. We were doing television, believe it or not. Was 4 cameras. So you would have, the two shot, then you'd have the host close up, and then you would have the guest close up, and then you might have a fourth camera if you were lucky to like swing around and shoot audience participation. But for the most part, it was done with 3 to 4 cameras. So in Fernwood Tonight, I had 4 cameras. But see, the way I would photograph Fernwood Tonight, being young and not understanding, was the relationship. If the band played, I'd rake across the band to the home base, and Norman would go crazy. As you know, even today, when David Letterman is doing his monologue or Jay's there, it's only in the last few years that they cut to Paul Schaefer, or they cut to the sidekick Ed McMahon. Everything to them was proscenium. You shot at proscenium because they came from, vaudeville. Norman Lear came from vaudeville, radio, and then television, and there was no such thing as side angles because it broke the fourth wall, and that showed that there was a camera in the studio. Much, much later came the Larry Sanders Show, and even before then, Gary is a very good friend. He's a very talented guy. Even before then, Gary had already broken the fourth wall with his first show, where he would step out of character like George Burns did and Gracie Allen and talk to the audience. So the way I thought it looked good was not the way that they were traditionally used to seeing it. And it wasn't until much later that Norman, I was on camera and I was doing I have to just interject this here. I never gave up my day job. I always shot, maybe 3 or 4 years into my directing career, because I never really thought that the directing was going to take. It was hard to get assignments. And, I really wasn't certain about it. It just kind of happened. I mean, once I went to work for ABC and did the In Concerts with Wally Weltman, then 2 producers found me, a girl named Bonnie Burns and David Yarnell, and they said, we have a series, it's called Don Kirshner's Rock Concert, and, we'd like you to be like the AD of it, not the director. And I go, the AD, the assistant director? I said, that's like a lateral move. I'm a director of photography. I just directed 5 In Concerts. But they rotated those, so, it would be me, it'd be Yorn, it would be Barry Glazer. So I said, I don't know about that. And I didn't firmly get my DGA card yet. There was a period where you had to get 30 days in. So I thought, well, I was with somebody who said to me, you want that DGA card? I think you should just go take 30 days, go be the AD, get the DGA card. You can always go back and shoot. So to this day, I still carry all my IA cards so that I can camera operate and I can go out there and set up shots and stuff. So for the first 4 to 5 years, well, maybe 3 to 4 years, I did both. I shot and I directed. So it was kind of a hybrid career that I had. As a matter of fact, a funny story, I think anyway, was there's a cameraman, his name is Bill Philbin, and he does all of the shows and has for 35 years with me. And I was directing Rock Concert. I did get the Guild card. I did go in and AD for John Moffat and all these directors that I spoke about. And then eventually John Moffat, who's very active at Addis, as a matter of fact, he and Lee Miller, really great guys for Addis and great fellows. John was the hot director at the time, and I was his AD. But, he would come in and he would direct 5 bands in a row, and then he'd leave and he'd go do another show, and he'd leave all the footage with me, and I'd have to edit it. So I had an ISO switcher where I could call up any of the 5 cameras. So instead of really preparing John for the next shot, I started cutting the show on the ISO switcher and putting that on the air. John got wind of that and saw it clearly, and he turned to me and he turned to Bonnie Burns and said, you don't need to hire me anymore. Louis cuts a better ISO than I cut a line feed. Hire him as the director. And so they did. And anyway, Bill Philbin, so now I'm directing Rock Concert, and I need another cameraman. And all the guys recommend this guy named Bill Philbin. And they say he's really hot. So we're standing at Santa Monica Civic. We're going to do 8 bands that night, and one after another. We're going to be there forever. Bill comes onto the loading dock. He walks up to me. I look at him. He's about 6'5". I'm about 6 foot. I'm looking up at him, and I go, "You're Bill Philbin." He goes, "You're Lou Horvitz." He says, "You're Louis J. You're Louis J. Horvitz." And I said, yeah, I am. And I go to him, I go, "I hear you're pretty good." He goes, "Well, I don't know." And I said, "Well, you better be." And I walked away. And he turned out to be not only one of my closest friends, one of the greatest operators I'd ever worked with. We do the concert. The next day, I jump into my 67 Austin Healey. I drive down to an Alpha Beta, market. Bill Philbin pulls up. I pull up. We go into the store. He's looking at me and he's going, "Hey, it's good to see you." I said, "You did a great job last night, Bill. You were really terrific." He goes, "Oh, thank you." He goes, "You must be a really hot director." And I said, "Oh, thank you." And then we went in to the frozen food behind closed glass to do hidden camera Alpha Beta commercials, and he got on headset on his camera. He thought I was the director. I was the other camera operator, and I put on my parka. He put on his parka. We went into the freezer. We shot through the glass. He looked at me, and he goes, "You're not the director?" And I said, "Shut the fuck up. I need the money." And he kept looking at me through the whole thing. I said, "Don't say a word, because next week you will be working for me. I will be directing." And so we crossed over many times, where one day I was the director and one day I was the shooter. It was pretty damn funny.
When you moved on to Solid Gold, was that a natural fit, or was it a whole new challenge because of the format with dancers in addition to music? And how did that come about?
I was directing Don Kirshner's rock concert. I mentioned that earlier. And Don was a very, very famous and talented entrepreneur. He was and is the Brill Building sound that you read so much about in the book, The Hitmen, the guys that made Tin Pan Alley, the guys that would find the writers, put 2 of them in a room, Carole King and Jerry Goffin, Lieber and Stoller. And then they would take their sheet music and they'd go right downstairs. It's still there on 44th and Broadway, the Brill Building sound, and right underneath it is where you can buy all the sheet music of any song ever written. And they would give the sheet music to the piano players in this building, and they'd play the music. And if you liked it, you bought the sheet music, you took it home, you gave it to somebody who played piano in the house, and they played it. Don Kirshner had his own series called Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. On ABC was In Concert. That was Dick Clark. So I started directing for Don Kirshner's Rock Concert and didn't do any of the ABC things. Later came Burt Sugarman's Midnight Special. These were the 3 primary rock and roll late night music shows of all music on television. They were the predecessors to every video you can think of today. At any rate, Don not only had all the publishing rights to all of these writers, not only was he on camera, but every show he introduced it, "Hi, I'm Donnie Kirshner. Welcome to Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. I was at dinner with Clive Davis and his lovely wife Sheila just the other day when they brought on a fabulous band, Martha Hoople, and they're here tonight to sing for you. Later, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin will play for you. And tonight I have a very special thing for you. We have a comedian. His name is Jerry Seinfeld, and he will perform for you too. So I hope you enjoy the show. This is Donnie Kirshner. Thank you for tuning in." And then off we'd go. So he was the guy that not only in late night television put on all of the everything was live music. Midnight Special was track because it was NBC and it was the network. We were live because we had the record plant trucks, we had the Eagles, you had the Stones, you name it. They only wanted to play live. So Don had the publishing rights, he had the television show, he had all of the record companies on the take to him. Ultimately, he decided with David Yarnell, who had Lenny Bruce, that all of these comedy clubs were popping up in New York. Mitzi Gaynor's Comedy Store, Catch a Rising Star, Rick Newman. he had them open up the West Coast versions of it, and we would start to introduce in the music format comedy people that we did at the Comedy Club, the Comedy Store. Jay Leno was the warm-up man at the Comedy Store. David Letterman was doing roller disco. Jerry Seinfeld was a stand-up comedian. Gary was a stand-up comedian. So now he had music and he had comedy. So suddenly in late night, we were starting to get kind of a variety feel to it. Then Don got it in his head that at Studio 54 in New York was going really hot. All the dance clubs were happening, and he wanted to introduce dance into late night music, but he didn't want to pay for a choreographer, and he didn't want to pay for dancers. So David Yarnell and I flew to New York. We went to all these clubs, and here were these adagio dancers. They were ensemble dancers, Latin girls and guys, couples dancing, maybe 8 and 10 and 12 couples at a time, and they had routines worked up. This is, mind you, 72, 73, way before 1979 and Saturday Night Fever. And so with those adagio dancers, Don made a deal, and we flew them to Los Angeles, and we built a set, which was it was a concept that I had. I said, wouldn't it be great if it was a big ocean liner, and it was the dance deck of an ocean liner, and they do their routines on this deck, and they became Don's Disco Dancers. And so now we had sexy dancers, boys and girls, in hot outfits, which they'd all brought themselves. They'd outfitted themselves. We had comedians, and we had the top music of the day. This went on until about 1979, and from about 73 to 79, I directed that series. I did some in concerts. I did a couple of things for Group W, but all of a sudden came along the idea of a concept called first run programming for syndication. Prior to, and people who are watching this video will know that all the first run programs ended up on NBC, CBS, and ABC, the three networks. After they were done, the reruns went to the syndicated local stations in LA, KTLA, WGN, Chicago, KTTV, Channel 11, KCOP, Channel 13, and you saw reruns of the network shows. A guy named Al Massini got it in his head, I think we should do first run programming for syndication, made only for them, not for the networks, of which he created then and wanted to create a series called Solid Gold. And he also created 5 movies of the week just for the syndicated stations. He left the networks out because the syndicators, they were tired of kind of rerunning everybody else's material, but that was all the budget that they had with their limited markets. So in his concept of Solid Gold, I was approached while directing Rock Concert by Al Massini and a man named Bob Banner, also a very famous producer and director, Blood and Guts Banner, they used to call him because he shot boxing, and he was an early mentor for me. And he said, hey, Louis J., can you take what you're doing in late night and can we like glitz it up and we do like the hit parade, because that was Bob's big show. And in the hit parade, you counted down the top 10 songs of the day, which happened to be How Much Is That Doggy in the Window? And people would sit at home and they'd sing along to it. So the idea was in Solid Gold, we present the top 10 hits of the day. If we don't get the acts to perform them, we use the Solid Gold Dancers, which was Don's Disco Deck Dancers. And then we also integrate into this some comedy to give it a variety flavor, because that's what Banner came from, the hit parade, Perry Como. So now this was the hip pop version of Perry Como and the hit parade, and mixed with rock and roll or pop music. And I had to make a decision. Was I going to leave my regular work at Kirshner to go into syndicated television? And in 1979, we did a 2-hour pilot at NBC. And then Al Massini took that Solid Gold. He took his 5 movies of the week. And then he invited all of the syndicator buyers from all of the local stations to Los Angeles, and he put them all in the Beverly Hilton Hotel that Merv owns, and he said, this is my concept. It's called Operation Prime Time. It's just for you guys. You're the buyers. You're all here. You're all in competitor markets. So in one room was the buyer for KTLA, KTTV, KCOP. He goes, here's what I've got. Can you afford to leave this room without buying my package? And he sold them on first run programming. And out of that became Solid Gold. And I knew what to do with that show. None of them, meaning Banner and the people that are done no music really in prime time, knew what to do with it. But to be honest, it was a natural for me because I'd already been doing it. Now, mind you, and Don, if you've seen this now, and Ricky, his son, who's a good producer now, used to do introductions to, hi, I'm Ricky Kushner. I'm only 6 years old, but my dad wants me to say, Martha Hoople's coming back next week. Hope you get that, Ricky, because I still got that footage on you, you rat bastard. Kidding. This may be one of those time capsule things that we don't play for a while. So I had to make a decision. You know, I have to leave Don Kirshner. You don't leave Don Kirshner. You don't leave the godfather of music. So he tried to make me an offer I couldn't refuse, but I had bigger guys when they pounded on my door at my A-frame on the hill, and there was a little gunplay and some fisticuffs, and ultimately I got away from Don and I went to work for Bob Banner and Al Massini, and Solid Gold became the big hit for Paramount Studios of the 80s. And I would say that that is probably when you at best ask what it is that I was known for and what project might I have been most proud of, I would say that Solid Gold was that project because I was given full reign to light it, to shoot it, to create it week after week, 52 original shows a week. We did 2 one-hour shows in 3 days. Then we'd edit it linear. Then we'd come back and we'd shoot again. We did 4 two-hour specials a year. Ultimately, we went to a 5-day-a-week strip show until Paramount panned the life out of this project, and it nearly killed me. And ultimately, I left Solid Gold in the last 2 years of its existence, and I went into rehab. I changed my life. There was no rehab at that time. I got out of the rock and roll scene, straightened up, and then I went into live television.
And for the record, I know when you mentioned the Comedy Store, you meant to say Mitzi Shore, not Mitzi Gaynor.
I said Mitzi Gaynor.
That's
Excuse
right.
me, I'm Mitzi Shore.
Right.
Hey, Mitzi Gaynor, I gave you credit. You're not even alive, so who the fuck's going to care? You're right, Steve. Teasing.
Actually, she is alive, isn't she?
Is she still alive? I'm sorry, Mitzi.
I
you are alive.
Depends on when you see this. Okay. But Solid Gold, there were a lot of pilots shot for that, right?
We okay here?
There were a lot of pilots.
I hear a lot of snoring over there.
Weren't there a lot of pilots shot for Solid Gold? And were you involved in all?
No, there were not a lot of pilots
okay.
shot for Solid Gold. Here's what but I know what you're going for.
Okay.
Solid Gold was very unusual, and Operation Prime Time was very unusual for the following reason. Al decided that a syndicator could either afford a 2-hour show once a week, or they could afford 5 half-hour shows so that they could fulfill their strip obligation and have a 5-day-a-week strip show. But he wanted to shoot both shows simultaneously. So what was unusual about Solid Gold, and the first one that we did, was that it was built as a 2-hour show. But it was also cut up into 5 half-hour shows. So if, I can remember this now, Christopher Arthur was the hit song at the time, and Sister Sledge and We Are Family. If that was in the 2-hour show, it was also in one episode of the 5 half hours that we cut out of that. So the way that I did it, because nobody kind of knew how could we do this, go in the studio, and what happened, again, this was my learning ground, was that I had a wall. It was like a room like this that had 4 big walls on it, and on one wall was the 2-hour show, all the cards for it, and then on the next wall was show 1, 2, and so I had to do wild Sister Sledge for the 2-hour show and also set it up for show 3, but not see them, but what they played in. So it was a puzzle of how to do it. And I could lay this out. I don't know how I could lay it out. I just could. I just and the complexity of it. And as a matter of fact, I would make people take Polaroids of the boards when I left at night, things around, and if he moved anything around, then when you went to edit it, it didn't fit. So what people thought was for sale by Al Massini that day. So you could walk away and buy the 5 half-hour version